After years of long hours, low pay, and terrible job security, Hollywood writers are on strike. Now, there's bad business everywhere, and unfortunately, our favorite shows are no exception. This is going to be one of the biggest production stops in Hollywood history, and that means many of the favorite shows that we enjoy every day aren't going to see new material until this strike is resolved. But let me be clear, writers are not the bad guys here. According to strike leaders, this was their final Hail Mary option to get a fair deal. But the question is, how did things get so bad, and how is it going to affect consumers like you?
I can't take no loss. I don't even know what it costs. I hit the ground and it go off. Yeah, hit the ground and it go off. Yeah, I can't take no loss. I don't even know what it costs. Yeah, I hit the ground and it go off. Yeah, hit the ground and it go off. Yeah, run it. Ooh, I really feel it's my time. Think it's my year. Yeah.
First, we have to understand the key players in this labor battle. Like many industries in the US, writers have unions to protect the workers' rights. This is called the Writers Guild of America, or WGA, and it represents over 11,000 film, TV, news, radio, and even online writers. These creative workers touch almost every aspect of entertainment in some way. WGA writers contribute to platforms like Paramount, Netflix, Warner Bros., Universal Studios, and Disney. And these are just a few of nearly 350 studios directly affected by the strike. These big studios all operate under the umbrella of the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. This organization negotiates against the Writers Guild of America, and together they set pay and work conditions for writers. Prior to the strike, the WGA spent 6 weeks fighting for fair pay and more job security for writers. Those negotiations failed. The WGA says the studio's response were, quote, wholly insufficient. In the strike announcement, the WGA stated that they are determined to achieve a new contract that reflects fair pay and the value of contribution to company success that includes protections to ensure that writing survives as a sustainable profession. But with streaming services reaching all-time high levels of viewership, wouldn't it follow that the writers themselves would see their fortunes rise along with the studios? Not necessarily. Let's take a deeper dive into the two main issues here: pay and job protection. The Guild wants what they say is fair pay that reflects the value of the writer's contribution to the company's success. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median annual wage for writers and authors was $69,510 a year in May of 2021. Now, this of course varies based on what they're writing, who it's for, and their experience. You might be thinking, that sounds like a great salary, so what's the problem here? Well, for starters, that work is becoming a lot less consistent and a lot less reliable. Ultimately, professional writing is a feast or famine industry, where writers cannot reasonably count on their income, and the WGA says this is a primary concern for all their workers. Let's look at what's happening at the industry as a whole. According to The New Yorker, there's a trend of streaming services ordering shorter seasons, which means less reliable income for the writers. Cost of living is hitting us all, but writers in metro areas who find employment only for a season are struggling to meet rent and daily needs. When the season ends, so do the paychecks. So there's no guarantee that a new job is coming, even for the best writers. And of course, the studios and production companies claim they're getting hit too. CNBC reported that streaming is changing everything, and studios are contending with declining television ad revenue as traditional TV audiences shrink and advertisers go elsewhere. But the WGA isn't buying it. In March of 2023, the WGA reported that industry revenue grew from $155 billion a decade ago to over $220 billion today. All of this driven by the rise in streaming services. WGA representatives argue that companies are simply using streaming as an excuse to underpay writers even as revenues climb. According to their statistics, in the 2013 to 2014 season, 33% of all TV series writers were paid the minimum basic agreement on the WGA contract. But today, almost half are working at minimum because many studios are not paying extra for experienced writers. Imagine that. You've worked decades on your resume, you're overqualified, and yet you're making the same amount as a first-year writer because the studio wants to save money. But that's not even the whole story when it comes to streaming. Writers say they're also getting shorted on residuals. For those who don't know, residuals are payments made to writers after a show is released. Residuals go up or down depending on how well the show performs. Make a hit show that everyone loves, you get a big check in the mail. If it bombs, you get a small check or no check. That's fair. But streaming services took this old system and turned it on its head. When hit shows are re-aired on streaming platforms like Hulu or Netflix, those checks are much smaller. Keep in mind, writers need to move from project to project to keep the paychecks coming, and there can be long periods of little to no income between shows. Even if you make a nice 4 or 5 figure check, it could be a long time before the next check comes. This plays into the strike's fight for job security. WGA wants to help writing survive as a sustainable profession. Let's break this down into 2 main issues. It starts with the writer's room. It used to be a team of writers in a room coming up with a dozen or 24 episodes, and many would stay on for the production. Now they say it's less writers, less pay, often virtual over Zoom, throwing out ideas with no guarantee of an actual show. So it could be a total waste of time for people who need to work for money. And it only one stays for the duration of the production. Hear it from comedian writer Sarah Schaefer. She tweeted, "According to the WGA negotiating committee, the studios are pushing for a day rate for comedy and variety writers. Truly horrifying. We won't survive something like that." She went on to say, "Why is a day rate a problem? It's a rollback from our current contract, which protects us on weekly minimum rates. And for many comedy variety shows, we require a 13-week contract. Day rates would allow studios to hire fewer writers and overwork the writers they do hire." The other problem writers face is artificial intelligence. In their negotiations, WGA is asking that AI can't write or rewrite literary material. It can't be used as source material, and MBA, short for Minimum Basic Agreement, covered material cannot be used to train AI. And what was the studio's response? They came back and offered to host yearly meetings to discuss advancements in technology. Not the kind of protection WGA writers are looking for. Even further, Doctor Strange writer C. Robert Cargill said on Twitter, "The immediate fear of AI isn't that us writers will have our work replaced by artificially generated content. It's that we will have to be underpaid to rewrite that trash into something we could have done better from the start." The Guild claims that low pay is forcing writers into the gig economy, where they're picking up side hustles and moving in with their parents to make ends meet. So let's compare top executive salaries to what those who are actually writing the content are making. In 2022, just 8 of the top CEO salaries in large studios was over $770 million. The WGA estimates that their request for higher pay would gain writers approximately $429 million per year from the studios. This is collectively for all their members, not just 8 of the top earners. So what's it going to take to end this strike? Well, when it began, the studios fired back at the WGA with a statement claiming their package includes the largest first-year pay increase in 25 years. The studios also said that writers' demands for minimum staffing levels and guarantees of employment are incompatible with the creative needs of a changing industry. They also claimed the WGA pay estimates are undercalculated when things like benefits are included. It doesn't sound like they're eager to even meet in the middle here, but when we look at history, the last WGA strike in 2007 through 2008 lasted 100 days. The action cost the California economy an estimated $2.1 billion as production shut down, and out-of-work writers, actors, and producers cut back on spending. Things could get very dark for writers. Because of the strike, they literally cannot work. But what other option do they have? In the meantime, this equates to rent, bills, and food on the table being called into question. And in turn, viewers are going to notice their absence. Like many strikes, the point is to put pressure on the employers. You may have noticed some of your favorite shows aren't airing right now, like Saturday Night Live. That's because the writers are day of content producers. In general, all writers' rooms working on new episodes have stopped. Writers who were on set or in post-production to oversee work have left. Writers can't meet with studios or sell any new content. Productions are only shooting what's already been written, which means shows and movies may now be delayed. Upcoming seasons might be shorter or could be canceled altogether. We might start seeing more reality TV shows because shows like that tend to be unscripted, and many of those writers are not WGA members. Overall, this affects all of us, not just our recreational binge watching, but our entire economy. Writers participating in the strike are fighting for fair pay, and they're willing to put up with short-term pain for long-term increases in job security and fair compensation for the value they provide. But things are gonna get worse before they get better. If the Screen Actors Guild of America gets involved, that's an estimated 160,000 more jobs put on hold while this fight is figured out. As the trickle-down effects of this strike spread throughout the economy, it's going to be very easy to blame the writers. People will be angry at the stoppages in production, canceled shows, lost jobs due to the strike. But let's not forget what this is really about. It's the number 8. 8 studio executives hoarding $750 million in revenue for themselves, leaving the writers who put the actual content on paper. These are the people who create the footage that we see every day, the writers of our favorite shows. The real content producers are being left out so that 8 studio executives can live like kings. How many hundreds of millions of dollars do you really need before it's enough? How much do you really need to keep for yourself before you share with people whose labor is making you rich? Writers of America, I support you.
I don't really hold out of books, but I'ma learn how to fix that. Some opportunities are never coming.